Morning, class. Today I'm going to show you the terminology with this bag of clay and some of the ins and outs of what you do and what you don't want to do. So let's get started. All right, I cut off myself a kind of a weird shape. So, one of the things we're going to talk about is kneading the clay. Kneading it, kind of like how you knead dough. Now you can see that piece I got, there's a good chance I could have got air bubbles in it. So it's really important that when I'm kneading the clay, that I get all the air bubbles out. Mr. Wright, why are air bubbles bad? Well, if you had an air bubble in this piece and we let it sit out and all the water evaporated from it, remember there's water in the clay because that's why we keep it in a plastic bag, and it'll be fine before we fire it in the kiln, and we'll get to that in a minute. But when we fire it, the clay piece shrinks even more. But does air shrink? Well, yes, if you're freezing it, but we're not freezing it. We're firing it. So when you fire something, the air inside is going to expand. So you have the air expanding, the piece shrinking, and it explodes. Actually, it doesn't really explode. It just kind of falls apart. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles in your piece. So before we get started on this lesson, let's go see what tools we have around the house that we could use. Come on. Got this out of my firewood place. It's a good idea to work on some kind of surface that you can actually pick up and move it. And I wouldn't work on a really slick surface like a tile countertop or granite or even a wood surface that's real polished, because the clay will stick to it. So this is good. And then I just grabbed a good old fork, knife, and spoon. Honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do with the spoon, but I thought I'd grab it while I was there. And then, if you got sandpaper, great. If you don't, we're going to learn some simple terms about this bag of clay. So, when the clay is not fired, it is called greenware. Greenware. So yes, this is not the type of clay that you would commonly get at a craft store and you would put in the oven. We don't bake it in the oven. We fire it in the kiln. Fired in the kiln. So greenware, I'm going to explain 3 different stages. So the first stage is right when we pull it out of the bag, and it is soft. Soft. So when it is soft, it is moldable. Moldable. Okay, you can smush it around, which is great. Now, I made a piece yesterday, and when it is in this stage, and I didn't cover it up, it is called leather hard. Leather hard. The thing with leather hard and soft clay, they look like the same color. But here's the thing with leather hard. It tends to want to break, okay? So, in this stage, it is very good to carve it. Carvable. So if you have a butter knife, you can see it carves really nice. I'm just using a good old butter knife here. Look at that, look at that. So in the third stage, I left this piece of clay out, put it in the sun. This is bone dry. Bone dry. Now obviously, it totally breaks. Okay, it's a lot lighter in color, and when it's in this stage, this is where the sandpaper comes in handy. It's good to sand it. Sandable. Now, when you do any sanding, do it outside. You don't want to breathe the dust from this clay. You want to breathe air. Just like when you're making pancakes, you don't want to breathe pancake mix. You want to breathe air. So, when you're sanding, make sure you sand outside. Once your greenware becomes bone dry, that's when we put it in the kiln. And the kiln is this big, yeah, they come in different sizes and stuff, but they're big ovens. And the difference between your oven in the kitchen and the kiln at school is that the kiln at school will get over 2,000 degrees. That's pretty hot. If you were to play hide and go seek in it and we forgot about you, well, I don't want to go there. So when your piece comes out of a firing, it now is called bisqueware. Bisqueware. Let me show you a couple projects that are bisqueware. All right, this is pretty cool. A little guitar, a little dragon. You hear that? Bisqueware has kind of a pinging noise to it. That's how you know the difference between greenware and bisqueware. But bone dry greenware just kind of has a thud noise. Let me show you what else we can do with this wonderful versatile material. Now, normally in a classroom we have a slab roller where we could roll the clay through and get it nice and clean and flat, especially for those of you that have a sense of architecture and geometry. But we're going to use some things around the house. I can show you how to make our own homemade slab roller. Come on, let's go get some more tools. We got some more tools. Got some books and a big bottle of root beer. We're gonna make our own homemade slab roller. Let's get some of this other stuff out of the way. Remember these Mo Willems books? These are great. Whatever books you decide to use, make sure they're the same thickness. So I got 2 books here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bottle of root beer here and I'm going to squish it. There we go. Now that is a bit of a thick piece. Well, I got a little clay stuck on here. See, you can tell that slick surfaces tend to... Now my clay is a little thick, so I'm going to take it down a couple books. But you can see, there we go. Look at that, look at that. Thank you, Mo Willems. Now you can be inventive however you want to, but the idea is you got something round and you roll it onto something that's even on both sides. Now it might not look like much, but let me show you what you can do with this. One of the ways you can tell if it's leather hard is if you push down in it, you shouldn't be able to push your finger into it. Okay, maybe a little bit, but not much. Now, if you've got a ruler, it's a really good way to cut it. But if you don't have you don't need a ruler. You can use that book. Geez, we can be inventive. All you need is a straight edge. Now, I went and grabbed a steak knife because it's a little bit sharper than that butter knife, but be sure to ask your folks first. Nice, clean cuts. I'm not trying to get it done the first time. I'm just gonna cut some shapes. Look at that. Nice and clean. So for those of you that want to make maybe a box or maybe some kind of abstract sculpture, that's the direction I tend to go. Nice and clean lines there. Let me show you what happens when you're cleaning something really soft. You can kind of get it, but it just tends to be a little bit more sticky and gooey. And when we're putting it together, you end up getting your fingerprints all over it. So when I'm doing this method called slip and score, I like to do it when my clay is about medium leather hard. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to put two pieces of clay together, especially when they're leather hard. You can't just smush them together. Sometimes they will look like they're sticking and holding together, but when we fire it, it just falls right off. So it's super important to know this method and how I'm going to teach you about slip and score. I grabbed that salsa container. Oh, chipotle salsa is so good. And all you need is a little bit of water in here, not much. And then what we're going to do, we're going to put a little bit of clay in here. We're going to take soft clay and we're going to smush it up into a bunch of little pieces. And if you've got a brush, awesome. If you don't have a brush, you can just even mix it with your finger like this, but a brush does help. Shoot, even an old toothbrush might help. So we want the water to look like dirty dishwater. So once you let this sit for a little bit, and the water now has a lot of clay in it, okay? So we call this slip. So this method I'm teaching you is called slip and score. Now, this is where the fork comes in handy. So if I wanted to put this piece right here, or maybe on the edge, if I'm making a box or something like that, I'm gonna stick it right in the middle like there. So again, the nice thing about your clay being leather hard is you can be a little more firmer with it. So I'm just gonna trace around my piece here. And then I'm going to take a fork, scratch up both sides. Now some of you might be thinking, aren't you making a bunch of tiny little air bubbles? Well, I'm going to fill it up with the slip. And this creates like a Velcro effect. You can see the slip, basically watered down clay, or clayey water, and I do both sides, and I squish it down like that. See, if my clay was really soft right now, I wouldn't be able to squish it and be as firm with it. I can clean up my edges, get a paper towel. And there you have it, a little clay construction. Now, greenware in any stage, especially leather hard and bone dry, is going to be fragile. So when you're done with your project, make sure that you're very careful with it. But that's your lesson for today, everybody. Let's recap on everything that we learned. We learned about greenware being soft and moldable. Leather hard is carvable. Bone dry, it's sandable. We learned about bisqueware, how it has that pinging noise after we fire it in the kiln. We learned how to make our own slab roller. And we learned about slip and score construction. All right, you guys, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to play around with this a little bit more and see what I can do with it. Kind of a fun piece. I just made it with 5 different shapes. That's a good challenge. All right, you guys. Be patient. Keep making. and we got to encourage each other. Until next time. Maybe I should do it inside. Moldable.